Obviously, I think Donald Trump getting foreign leaders to try to interfere in American democracy is much worse, on a much greater scale than a president lying about sex during a sexual harassment lawsuit, even though that was bad enough for the United States Supreme Court and, of course, the Supreme Court of Arkansas to disbar Bill Clinton. But at the same time, the comparisons, Mika, when you look at the gravity of the charges, don't even compare.
Well, let's read Senator Lamar Alexander's statement, which basically says he did something terrible. We don't care. There's no need for more evidence to prove that the president asked Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter. He said this on television on October 3rd, 2019, and during his July 25th, 2019 telephone call with the president of Ukraine. Alexander goes on, there's no need for more evidence to conclude that the president withheld United States aid, at least in part, to pressure Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. There's no question he did it. The House managers have proved this with what they call a mountain of overwhelming evidence. Alexander then writes, it was inappropriate for the president to ask a foreign leader to investigate his political opponent and to withhold United States aid, hundreds of millions of dollars, to encourage that investigation.
By the way, in a country that was being attacked, invaded by Russia.
When elected officials inappropriately interfere with such investigations, it undermines the principle of equal justice under the law. But the Constitution does not give the Senate the power to remove the president from office and ban him from this year's ballot simply for actions that are inappropriate. The question then is not whether the president did it, but whether the United States Senate or the American people should decide what to do about what he did. I believe the Constitution provides that the people should make that decision in the presidential election that begins in Iowa on Monday. You know, I find this to be reprehensible. And by the way, inappropriate is not the right word for shaking down a foreign leader to perhaps creating hundreds of victims, dead Ukrainians, for dirt on a political rival. That's inappropriate? No, it's unpatriotic.
And the thing is,
it's not how we conduct ourselves, and he should be removed from office if you're thinking under the auspices of what it means to be an American citizen. Well, good God.
And also the commander. You've got the commander-in-chief, of the United States of America, Willie, not only asking the Ukrainians, but then going public, asking the Chinese, the communist Chinese, to interfere in American democracy. And for Lamar Alexander to dismiss that as, quote, simply inappropriate, of course, is preposterous. If John Bolton, the person who was a witness to all of this, had come forward, Lamar Alexander would have, and the rest of the Senate and the rest of the country, would have a far better grasp on the gravity of just how bad the president's actions were. But that will never happen because he ducked and ran.
And it's important to say again, no one was asking at this point for Senator Alexander or any other senator to vote to convict the president of the United States. The question before the Senate right now is, will you vote to allow an open and fair trial? Will you allow documents, witnesses, evidence in the Senate trial? That was the question. So he's leaped ahead now in his argument and said it's not our job to convict the president. No one was asking him yet to convict the president. And Mike Barnicle, in the first line of Senator Alexander's statement, he writes, there is no need for more evidence to prove something that's already been proven. So he's saying the House proved that the president of the United States did that. But his argument somehow, and this is a guy who's been in the Senate for a long time, is that it's not our job to convict the president. It should be up to the voters.
Yeah, Willie, you know, when you step back and look at the entire landscape of what's occurred in the Senate over the past few weeks, and you think about it for just a second, you come to the conclusion that whenever the vote occurs, whether it's tonight or tomorrow, whatever it occurs, this is a defining moment for the history of this republic. And I don't think a lot of people, and certainly the Senate, I don't think they've thought about that enough. And the defining moment is this. They have rewritten the Constitution, in effect, to the point where now there's a clause in the Constitution that says the personal and political interests of this president or any president in the future can be defined as being in the national interest.
And that's the explicit argument, Joe, that Alan Dershowitz made that was roundly mocked, but now has effectively been codified or will be codified today with this vote.
You got to love it. Alan Dershowitz says it and then denies he says it. I mean, it is a wonderful crystallizing moment in the era of Donald J. Trump in Washington, D.C., where people act as if what they said cannot be replayed back on videotape.
Yeah.
Does Alan Dershowitz think we're in the 16th century and there's not any recording of what's going on here? I mean, even then, people would have scribbled it down.
But this is now going to be codified, Joe. This is now going to be codified by their vote. Depends.
It depends on what happens in November. It depends on if, you know, what Richard Nixon did. Actually, he left office, but we still remember, Mike, you and I at least, still remember watching the election returns in November of 1974. The Republican Party was crushed. They were demolished. It was an overwhelming rejection of all that Richard Nixon had done and all that Republicans had done to cover up for him. And so we're going to have to see in November. History will pass that judgment after we see what happens in the fall. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.